And we are recording on Saturday, November 15th, 2025 at 10:21 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Kirby Shepard. I believe I was just on last week or the week before with Dr. Federer on a Joel Altman show. Dr. Federer, for everybody listening, he first came on my show back in like 2020, 2021. He's a cool dude. Back before I had any platform or any reason to offer, he just came on and he was mentioning, psyops when I was, he and I were talking with Joe, and you don't know, but anybody who knows the show is I've had on everyone under the sun, from CIA to NSA to Secret Service, Delta Force, Ground Branch, NASA, whatever. Um, and we've kind of gotten into things like PSYOPs before. Obviously, the Modernization Act, which was a huge topic because I got banned from YouTube and iTunes in 2021 for interviewing Dr. Malone, who had he holds the mRNA vaccine patent. He had the incendiary comment of older people should get it, younger people shouldn't, and so that was wrong thing, and I was banned from YouTube for 4 years, but now I'm back. Um, but in general, a big thing we kind of talked about on this show is psyops. The podcast really is kind of a history of the COVID psyop, and you could even say the Ukrainian pro or against, I don't care. Um, but yeah, in general, but I don't actually know anything about it. I read a lot of Cold War stuff technologically. I don't really know anything about the extent of my knowledge is like reverse psychology. Say you don't want it, and then they'll like
Yeah.
that's where I am. So I'm gonna shut up, dude. Introduce yourself, tell everyone like what your background is, and we'll just wing it.
Yeah. I'm Kirby Shepard. For a good stretch of my life, I guess you could call them the dark years of my life, really. I was a PSYOP guy in the 2010s era. And right around, they started making a pivot. And they don't call themselves, at least when I got out of it, they weren't calling themselves PSYOP anymore. They decided to go with the cooler name of MISO, Military Information Support Operations, which everybody knows is a soup, and that was kind of like an inflammatory thing within the community for a long time. So I spent a lot of time in that world, and just a very, very, uh, very dark, low morals, I guess, in my own personal life. And I remember just I did pretty well in the community because I actually read the manual, and a lot of the folks were just kind of just winging it. You'd get a lot of guys who are like, yeah, it's basically PSYOP is basically like if you can pick up somebody at the bar, then you're good. You're probably good for PSYOP. So you'd get all these artillery guys, former artillery and infantry guys who would see PSYOP forces downrange, and they would say like, "Man, I want to grow a beard, and I can't necessarily make the cut to be special forces, but those guys seem cool," and so they'd all join PSYOP, and it really ended up not being a great thing for a long time. And I was actually trying to research this over the last a couple days since you and I first talked, because back in 20 sometime between 2017 2019, Congress launched an inquiry into U.S. PSYOP forces' use of funds and basically their line of effect, how well they were doing. And the result of it ended up being Congress coming out and saying, like, hey, you better get your crap together because we don't want to waste the amount of money that we're spending on you guys to continue doing this. And that turned into a thing where basically three projects came out of that. But in that whole time, um, the reason for that is you'd have kind of like a soft pedal into PSYOP where pretty much anybody could get in. You'd have these real dumb artillery guys or real dumb infantry guys coming in, and I hope some of them hear this and rethink their lives actually and life decisions because PSYOP needs to not just be a bunch of like former artillery guys who want to wear khakis and a polo. But you'd get a lot of that, and I spent quite a bit of time in 2019. I sort of transitioned out of that, and I went into mobilization and deployment for the military. And after a little while, the I ended up getting out. I actually got out of the army in May of 20, actually this year, May 24th of this year, and it was a pretty neat thing. In that, when I left. we actually moved up to where we're at now in Montana, and we planted a church. And I had become a Christian sort of late, uh, sometime sometime around the time that this congressional inquiry was going on, like 2017, and it really gave a wildly different perspective. So I actually met Dr. Federer here. We have had him out to a church event, and it was, in my opinion, at the time, it just felt like my crowning failure as a pastor. And so um, we had all this hype surrounding. We'd been planning for about a year and a half to have him out here, and we had like 11 people show up. And he actually sacrificed this. He'd been asked to go to Pennsylvania to speak to a crowd of like 3,000 people alongside of the now Vice President J.D. Vance. And I was like, hey, he asked me, like, hey, would you mind if I cancel? I was also asked to go to this thing at the same time. I was like, hey, you do whatever you want. And he decided to come out instead and to honor his original commitment. And like 11 people showed up to this event. So it was not, I hated that. And actually, in my conversation getting ready to take him to the airport, it came up that I'd been in PSYOP. And and I started talking with him about the kind of spiritual impact of PSYOP and how the whole thing is doctrinally tied, inseparable from some of the principles in Scripture. And I think that really caught his ear. And so we've had a couple of conversations about that, and we've gone back and forth about some things. And I was telling him about the Smith-Mundt Act, which I'm sure if you've been following that, you probably know a lot more about the Smith-Mundt Act, but that was sort of the downfall of, in my opinion, privacy in America. They really used that to just take extreme liberties with the Patriot Act and all these different kinds of things. And you could probably elaborate on that more than I could. But I know recently, House Resolution 5704, they proposed a repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act like last month. And there's like 9 co-sponsors to that. They've been trying to repeal that every once in a while, so I don't know if it'll go through. I know that the last action of it was like on the 10th or the 8th or something like that of October. And it was forwarded to the Foreign Affairs Committee on House Committee on Foreign Affairs. And that may have to be resubmitted. I talked to a couple of friends, and everything that was submitted during the government shutdown, I guess, has to be resubmitted because everything got forwarded to the trash bin, I guess, during that time. So we'll see if that ends up happening or if that was just a political stunt. But I'd love to see that repealed. It has done an incalculable harm on the American people. So with you are probably following this with the repeal of uh, or with the changes to the Smith-Mundt Act in 2012, I think it was,
Mhm.
um, there right around that time, you started to see a huge shift uh, in media, like the media world in the United States, where you would see just some real subtle things coming in that were sort of degrading to the way that the government did things, the way that the family did things, and towards any sort of, whether it's Christian or anything else, any sort of religious ideology. And I'm quite certain that that was a direct result of Smith-Mundt. So now, fast forward, it's November 15th of 2025. I'm the lead pastor of a church plant in Great Falls, Montana. It's called Embassy Church. And we've been doing that for about 2.5 years. It's been an interesting thing. I don't often tell people, yeah, I used to be a PSYOP guy, because I have a number of folks who've come through the church and they're like, "Oh, you're a Fed, man. You're probably just a plant, and you're a CIA guy or an FBI guy or something like that." And like, that's I'm not. I'm just a regular guy. So and then we're up here, my wife and I, we have 5 kids and just sort of enjoying life. I really wanted to slow down in life once we came up here and planted the church, but it seems like things have actually sped up. We're a lot more involved in the political scene than we once were. And that's sort of where we're at, man. So
How old,
that's who I am.
how old are you?
I am 32.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
35. Um, yeah, I mean, what about Dr. Federer showing up? I've had shows I've had huge shows where I've put together where the other person doesn't show up, and it's always, yeah, you can be like embarrassed and stuff. Like, but I found it always in a long enough timeline, it actually starts to work. I mean, I look at the guy that actually brought me back to Christ, Charlie Duke. He's one of three men alive who walked on the moon. It's a psyop, shut up. I had him on in 2020, and he actually we talked off air, and he kind of convinced me to start praying again, and it's changed my life radically.
That's
But that
awesome.
show, I mean, Rogan's never had on an Apollo astronaut. That show didn't break 100 views for like 5 years. I was
Yeah.
so embarrassed. I'm like, this dude is like, he would be texting me, I'd be like, can you do it this weekend? He'd be like, sorry, the Sultan of Dubai is flying me out. Like, he's still on like a world tour
Yeah, yeah.
50 years later.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but I look at that and I'm like, and he's like, that's so cool that it helped you. But so, same with Dr. Federer. In terms of of what you were saying about low morals or like a dark place for you. I mean, I was gonna say and I know obviously, it's a broad, but the one artillery guy I know is probably has a higher IQ than me. He's fucking brilliant. I was gonna say he's like
Yeah,
the
there's
one.
plenty of them, just to
I know,
be fair.
I know. Yeah, I know we're talking shit, but like, fuck you,
Yeah.
Don, if you're listening. But like, you know, I have friends like that, and then I have friends all the way up to legitimate like CIA ground branch Delta Force, like,
Yeah.
and a lot of them have like, a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD. Not the really top, but Delta Force, I think the saying is like they have nostalgia. But like
For
a
sure.
lot of the
Yeah.
guys, they'll talk about how bad the PTSD is, and they'll also tell you it was like the best time of their lives, the camaraderie, blah blah blah. When you're talking about the low point, is it so somebody like Don, he'll talk about it as the best time of his life, the camaraderie, all of it. And then he'll also tell you about, friends that were blown up in front of him, and you can see how
Right.
much it affects him. And that's clearly a very dark point.
Yeah.
Do you mean dark in that it's service in the military and there's darkness, or did you find yourself bending your own moral fabric or ethical fabric to be like, well, this is the job, someone's got to do it, kind of like a la Snowden, where he's like,
Yeah, yeah.
you and a lot of times that is, people like me who've never served. I have the privilege of not having to make those decisions. I go, well, that's tough, but sometimes you got to make this. Do you drop the JDAM and you get the terrorist and well, you take
Right.
out five kids? And it's like that. It sucks. Like it sucks. When you were saying dark, how do you mean? If you want to go into it, you don't have
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So like all of the above. I spent a lot of time. I gave my life over to the military. I really loved the mission, and PSYOP. The mission is, in fact, their logo is the horsehead chess piece, the knight, because it's supposed to be the most versatile piece on the chessboard. And so theoretically, like if you have to pull the trigger in PSYOP, then you're doing it wrong, which is ironic because they spent just a gross amount of money getting it like outfitted with a whole new arsenal of weapons. So they have 50 cals and Mark 19s, and like everybody has way more weapons than
But
than they need. But
for sorry for like like that. I've read a ton of books on the NSA. The
sure.
NSA has a lot of weapons, but it's because it's
Sure.
Fort Meade is like the crown jewel, so it's surrounded. But do you mean like at the base, or do you mean like
Oh no,
some
no, like
guys have
per
like,
company, battalion,
all
down
right,
to the teams, everybody's got, I mean, like just grossly outfitted. And it's kind of ironic. I mean, like we're never going to be our own security element, so I don't know why we necessarily need those. I mean, obviously you have your whatever, I don't know what the new service rifle is now, but you have your M4 or whatever, and that's cool. But it just kind of speaks counter. And the reason actually that all that stuff happened is because everybody wanted a piece of the global war on terror was a disaster for a myriad of reasons, but everybody realized that they were all the money was in direct action, so everybody wanted a piece of the direct action pie. So you got all these guys in special operations who were uh, deviating from uh their original mission set, and they were becoming closer to the Rangers. So you have everybody wanted to kick indoors. Nobody wanted to stick with their original mission. So PSYOP, their mission is influence, and they became significantly more of a direct action piece, civil affairs, special forces, kind of leaving behind the foreign internal defense mission, and everybody wanted to be like the Rangers or the SEALs. Even the SEALs, I mean, they are. I'm not going to go into that. I'll piss off some people that I have
My buddy,
a
my
great
buddy,
amount of respect for.
my buddy Dale was in Delta Force, Dale Comstock. He was the youngest ever member of Delta Force. He is GI Joe, and he'll
Yeah.
be on the show. He'll be like, "Not mind you, I have no military service. I've shot a gun a handful of times. I have a biology degree." He'll be like, "Tom, you know how Navy SEALs are pussies?" And I'll be like, "Dude, you can say that. I can't say that. You know how Dev crew's like a bunch of fags." I'm like, Dale, I can't tell you
Yeah,
not to
man.
say it.
Absolutely.
But I'm like, dude, I don't, sure, for the sake of the conversation. But sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, they all get their book deal and they won't shut up about being Navy SEALs. But
Yeah,
the yeah, so everybody wanted a piece of the direct action pie, and it really actually grossly harmed the American military because our special operations community was just this well-oiled machine that was designed to be able to take care of. There's a saying that low fades win wars. Everybody in SOF has kind of a low fade, and that is a lot less true these days than it used to be. And we are much less of subject matter experts in a very specific career field. Now everybody has a little bit of the direct action pie because everybody wants the money, and that money buys us weapons that we really don't need.
sure.
So, going back to your question though, low point, a little bit of everything. I mean, I was gone all the time, and so my family life was horrible. I got married immediately out of high school. So actually, I'll back up. I grew up in the church, and there was I would have called myself a Christian graduating high school, and um, we'll probably touch on that in a little
No,
bit.
same. I grew up private Catholic school up till
Yeah,
I was 16. You know, I become an edgy Reddit atheist,
for
and
sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's par for the course.
Yeah, it is.
Hey,
It's like,
sorry, keep going. Your audio cut out for a second. Keep going.
oh, my bad. So it is par for the course. I think a lot of people realize you actually grew up Christian adjacent. Your parents' faith can't be your faith. Your pastor, your priest, whatever, that cannot be your faith. You have to have your own. And so when I struck out and joined the military immediately, I thought that I was joining I don't know why I thought this because I was joining in the Obama administration. I thought that I was joining a like Reagan era military, like everybody's going to be patriots and they're going to be there to like serve king and country and all that kind of stuff. And turns out that was not it. I think like day four in reception, they repealed like don't ask, don't tell, and it was just kind of an interesting time, and the military was not what I thought it was. But in the PSYOP community, everything is very different than in conventional forces. The tail end of my career, I just dropped into the reserves, and I was I don't even know what it's called, like automated logistics, which drove me insane. It is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. But so I was gone all the time, and I got married right out of high school, and like I did all the right things, and I thought that because I did all the right things, God was obligated to bless my life, and so I could go run and gun and do whatever it was that I wanted to do and have fun. And my wife was going to be home waiting for me with a smile and like a baby in her hand and like freshly baked bread.
Yeah,
Turns out that was not the case. So home life is falling apart. I'm just butting heads with a lot of people in the military. There was just this incredible. I have some of my at the time they were my fondest memories. The camaraderie that was built was incredible, but also just the darkness of everything that was done. Um, Everything that we'd be around was became really heavy. So I started drinking a lot. And I tell people I only ever got drunk once, but I stayed drunk for 4 years, and that was true. And the if you run into like special operations guys, they are functional alcoholics, and I mean you can just kind of I was drunk all the time, and I remember showing up to work a couple times, and my first sergeant would be like, "Hey, Shepard, are you drunk?" And I'm like, negative top. He's like, all right, go run. Go do a 5 mile, and if you fall out, I'll call the MPs. But I puke my guts out, get back, and he's like, all right, get in your uniform. We got work to do today. And um, just And then a lot of times people would come up to me and be like, "Hey man, are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm dropping a lot of hints that I'm not." And they're like, "Well, can you still do your job? Because we kind of need you
Yeah.
to show up." Like, yeah, I can still. So it just perfect storm of things, and realizing like my faith was not actual faith. I was Christian adjacent, but I was not a believer myself, and
It's
there was no lordship.
conditional. God, I'm doing the right thing. How come you're not helping me? It's like, well,
Yeah,
that's
you're
kind of,
supposed to, man. I checked
yeah.
the boxes,
Yeah.
and so that turned out to not be actually what being a Christian is all about. And
And then, sorry, and on a long enough timeline, you find out he is actually helping you. All the
yeah,
bad
in
shit,
hindsight,
you go, oh, it was just really, really,
for
really
sure.
tough love.
Yeah, for sure. And like, and I tell people, I counsel with people all the time, and they're like, "Man, why would God do this to me?" And like, you may never know. There's a passage right at the very beginning of First Corinthians or Second Corinthians, the first chapter, that says that the reason that we go through these trials and like the suffering is so that we can comfort others with the comfort that Christ has comforted us with. So like that is to say, you don't really know why you're going through the things that you're going through until 20 years later you run into a guy who is in the exact same situation that you were in, and his life is falling apart and he can't tell up from down, and you realize you're the only person in that guy's life who can show him where Christ is at in the midst of everything. And it becomes this and then all of a sudden you have this moment where you're like, oh, all right, I get why like you took me through all that stuff. And you see one guy's life come into alignment, and you start seeing him do something that actually matters with eternal significance, and you're like, well, I guess I would go back and I'd do all that again if this is the result. But at the time
No,
you
no,
didn't
it's I no, I
don't
get
see
it.
it.
It's in 2014, I lost my older brother to suicide,
Yeah,
and I look at it now, and I'm like, I would do anything to have him back, but I also wouldn't change it for the world. Not only because of who it's made me, but my ability to like see people going through that, maybe they're suicidal, or people that survived a sibling suicide, and you go, that okay, that's why I'm here. I'm
yeah,
the only
100%.
person that it's not a normal thing. Like, everyone has your first, you get drunk the first time, your first breakup, your first
Yeah, yeah.
suicide is not like a normal part of life, and you find that, and then you meet someone and they've got that thing. You go, oh, that's why I had to go through it.
Yeah, for sure. And there was we I deal with suicide all the time
Sure.
back with in when I was still in PSYOP. And I'd even gotten to a point on several occasions, on three separate occasions, where I'd tried to take my own life, and just kind of in a miraculous way, it didn't work out. And at the time, like I knew who God was because I'd grown up in the church, and uh, would say that I believed in Jesus Christ. I actually had a friend who was a Muslim. He was my detachment NCOIC, and uh, he heard me kind of debating some kid who's like an atheist or something. And he's like, Shepard, I thought you were an atheist. I was like, no, no, I believe in Jesus Christ. I don't really want to live that kind of lifestyle. And, but I believe that he is who he says he is. And I believe in the Bible and everything. And he's like, that is the most retarded thing I've ever heard anybody
I don't think
say.
I've ever heard that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. He's like, I was like, thanks, man. I'm going through a lot. So I'd appreciate if you just keep your opinions to yourself. But, yeah, so stupid. And there was a lot of stupidity, but I just really, like, I believed it. I just didn't want the morals that came with it. And, you kind of have to be prepared to operate in, I mean, the whole mission set of PSYOP is influence operations, and you want to be able to influence in a uh, I mean, they'll say like, hey, our job is to influence a foreign target audience to take actions that are favorable to the United States and her allies. And it's about the influence. It's not about the long-term um, relationship, I guess. That's more of the civil affairs guys, and why we're supposed to work together with them. But it is it ends up being like a big gray area, because there's a lot of lies and deceit that are going to go into it. You have white psyop, which is where, we have our whatever our messaging is going to be overtly U.S. forces that are sharing this. Gray psyop, where it's kind of ambiguous, and black psyop, which is what everybody loves to do, in which is where you want, like, that's covert operations, and you want to be able to deny any sort of involvement. And you have this whole course in the military called MILDEC, military deception, which like going through the training, they tell you, hey, don't tell your spouse what you do because they'll never like believe anything that you say ever again. And I was like, oh, not my wife. She's gonna like it's gonna be good. And a couple years later, I got a divorce, so uh, it just really didn't work out well. So it just became a really dark time. And I had great friends in the midst of it, but then coming out of it and after I got saved, I was like, man, I really want to get my life together. I like realized my faith is my own faith. And I came to this point after trying to commit suicide where I was like, all right, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I don't care how hard it is. And I really meant that. And I think that was the moment where I realized like my faith was not my parents' faith. It wasn't anybody else's faith. It was my faith in Jesus Christ, to be my Lord. And Americans really don't like the word Lord. We fought a whole war to get people off our backs in that capacity. So we have this independent spirit. But when I did that, the kind of progressive coming out of that world became really difficult where because I had these ties to some guys who were just still in the middle of darkness. They're still dealing with a lot of stuff. They're still doing a lot of stuff that's morally ambiguous to say the least. And and it was constantly pulling me back in, and I just really was trying to get away from it and live a life where I felt morally like responsible for my own decisions and trying to like salvage my family life and all that kind of stuff. So uh, just ended up being it came to a tension point where I was like, man, I gotta like kind of walk away from a lot of this stuff. And so I still have good connections with a lot of those guys, but we don't talk nearly as much as we do because it ends up putting me in a dark place, which affects my wife, it affects my kids, it affects just so many different things. It affects my congregation. And that is something that I have to take responsibility for. So I guard my time a little bit more and those relationships. And it has turned into a thing where a lot of those guys know where I stand now. They know I'm praying for them. And sometimes they'll reach out and be like, hey, man, I'm struggling with this thing. And they'll seek counsel in that capacity. So there's sort of a blessing in that. But it was just for pretty much every reason that you can imagine. It was a really, really dark time for so long. Um, and actually in that, so this is actually what Bill Federer was really getting caught his ear and why he was trying to constantly tell me, hey, this was not a failure. Like God will use this for I was still in the military when I met him. So he's like, hey, would you be interested in coming on a podcast for and talking about this? And I'm like, dude, I don't know that I really want to get into that right now, especially while I'm still in the military. I've gotten my hand slapped a lot for especially with the vaccine stuff when I first came into the reserves, which is just such a different world. Uh, they they're like, hey, everybody who hasn't gotten the vaccine, go stand over here. This is my first drill. They're like, go stand over here. We're taking you to get the vaccine. And it's like a bunch of pogues that are like a bunch of warehouse managers or something that they don't even have a warehouse. And my first sergeant, who was a great first sergeant, she was doctrinally what a first sergeant should be. She's like, hey, you're going to get the vaccine today. I was like, no, I'm not. And she's like, yeah, you are. I was like, no, I'm not. And she is like, I don't think you understand what I'm telling you. You are going to you're going to go get in this van. You're going to go get the vaccine. And I was like, I don't think you understand what I am telling you. I said, no, I'm not. So you're going to have a really hard time trying to make me do this. And you're going to end up at the end of it, unless you're going to carry me off like against my will and have a bunch of people hold me down, it's not going to happen. So you can keep pushing this in front of all the troops, but you're just going to look like a fool. And so she's like, go wait in my office while she took everybody else to get the vaccine. Turned into this long time, just like everything in my career. But actually, so I'd submitted a religious exemption for this, and somebody that I'd worked with some time back who ended up being over JAG, I think, or having significant influence in JAG at the time uh, pulled my religious exemption and like whatever the system and was like, hey, we're going to set this one aside to examine. And they actually just held my religious exemption. Like they didn't deny it or anything like that for the entire duration of this whole thing where people are like, oh yeah, you got to get the vaccines. So I never had to get it. And so I think just because I'd made a friend some time back, kind of in the stupidest way, who was like, oh, I know that guy, sort of saved me from that. So I actually got to stay in and For about like 2 years, they just treated me sort of like garbage, like, and which is ironic because I'm like, all of my NCOERs and everything up to that point are like, hey, this guy's stellar. He's somebody that you want on your team. And then they're just like, oh, yeah, you're a dirtbag. I'm like, whatever. But it's like a bunch of reservists who've never done anything telling me that I'm a dirtbag. Um, so all that's happening. I met with Bill and we're sitting in this church. I'm getting ready to take him to the airport. I know this is kind of like more what you wanted to talk about.
Nah,
And
dude, I don't care. Take it wherever.
so uh, I don't even remember how it came up. But I remember talking about how after I got saved, I and I started studying my Bible a lot. As soon as I got saved, I'm like, man, I really want to know this thing more than just sort of academically. So in Christianity, they would teach you that Jesus Christ is the Word made flesh, and if you want to have that relationship with Him, then you really need to know the Word. So I started reading the Bible all the time. And scripture teaches that there are three God-ordained institutions. That is the church, which is in the Great Commission, is ordained by God to be the hope of the world. The government in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, where it's after the flood, Noah comes off the ark, and God says something to the effect of, hey, whoever takes a man's life, whoever sheds a man's blood, by man, his blood will be required of him, because he's an image bearer of the Lord. So he really places this high emphasis on the value of life because all men are image bearers of God. And so he ordains the human government to take the life. It's capital punishment, all that kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. And then the family, actually, all the way back in Genesis chapter 2, verses 24 and 25, he says that. He says, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And so he ordains the family in that capacity. And as I'm studying this and reading and studying theology and all these different kinds of things, something really struck me. These three institute doctrinally within PSYOP, if you want to influence a culture long term, which is why like the global war on terror, PSYOP is never gonna was never gonna have any sort of lasting effect. You'd have these guys who would go in, you're on a 9 month tour, you go meet with these village elders, and you're like, hey, we want to be able to work together with you. And they know after so long, like whatever, man, you're gonna be here for 4 to 9 months. And then a new guy is going to come in and he's going to have a different idea of how to do this because PSYOP can't get its crap together and formulate a legitimate campaign. There hasn't been an actual PSYOP campaign since like Vietnam. Uh, Everybody's just kind of like doing their own little thing, whatever seems good right now. There's no long-term like, hey, this is what we're going for. And this is sort of what I was talking to you about through text about the Arab Spring, Arab Summer kind of thing. But the so they'd come in for a couple months, and the Afghanis or the Iraqis, they knew you weren't going to be there for any lasting amount of time, and uh, so that they wouldn't take it seriously. You have to be there for like a minimum of 5 years, and you have to be able to have like played the long game. And without the coordination by command to be able to do that, it just was never going to happen. We're never going to be able to influence these guys who have had this belief for over 1,000 years. They are so set in their ways. We're not going to change their culture in 9 months, especially if we keep trying every 9 months with a new plan. But if you want to do that, doctrinally, PSYOP would teach you have to affect three different organizations. One is the government. The second is the religious institutions of the time and this whatever those look like. And the third is the family. And the way you do that is through education. So and that was particularly interesting to me after I became a Christian. And I kind of knew that doctrinally within PSYOP. And in order to have lasting influence, you have to be able to play the long game through the education system. That's going to be a minimum of like 15 to 20 years before you're going to see any sort of results from the work that you're doing. Because you're planting in young minds, hey, this is how you do X, Y, and Z. And these are going to be the people who are going to lead families one day. These are going to be the people who are going to lead the government one day. These are going to be the people who are going to be the clergy in whatever religious capacity. And those three things influence culture. So when I became a Christian, I realized like, man, these are the God ordained institutions. Why is it that there has to be some connection between the two things? PSYOP understands it's really through education, and in fact, I think God does too. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, he tells the families, "Hey, it's your responsibility to educate your children." There's a pastor, Vodi Bakum, who passed away recently, and he had said something to the effect of, speaking of like the public education system, we as Christians should not be surprised when we send our children off to Rome when they come back as Romans. And he's saying like, if you want to send your kids off to a public education run by the government, then you shouldn't be surprised when they come back as like, government drones.
Sure.
And it is a long game. But they've been playing this since way back, honestly. I think this started in the late 1800s, and they've been playing this game ever since then. You started getting people coming out of, I wrote a report on this right as I was coming out of PSYOP, um, talking about how we have become so susceptible um, to foreign influence in America. And it really started back in the 1800s. Broad strokes, you had everybody coming out. Back in the day, everybody used to be responsible for their own income. They were their own entrepreneurs. And then you started having people pulled out of, that sort of world and their own self-sufficiency, personal agency, and going into jobs working in a factory because you'd have a pension, you'd have like a 40-hour work week versus, 168-hour work week. And you'd have all these incredible benefits, and every generation they would kind of have less and less benefits because people knew how to take care of themselves less and less. You didn't have to offer that. You got these people who were obligated and they knew no other way. In the During the World Wars, you started to see this radical change to our education system. FDR had a huge part in this. FDR was just a grossly racist guy, and the which we could go into if you're interested. But he really kind of rewrote how we did education, and we started to have this systematic education system where instead of growing up with your intellectual peers, you started growing up in like with the people who are your same age
Yeah.
demographic. And traditionally, you put a bunch of like 16-year-old boys together in a room, they're not going to make wise decisions. So, you started having that, and it started becoming like memorization over, or it started becoming just get the facts down so you can test on it, standardized testing, instead of memorization. And then you have the sexual revolution and kind of like the post-war ideology of like, hey, you got all these guys from World War II they've gone through the Depression. They're like, we're going to give our kids the things that we didn't have. So we go into this time of untold economic prosperity. Simultaneously, we're taking all these Nazis into NASA and like bringing Operation Paperclip and all that kind of stuff. And so you start to make decisions as a nation based off of what's fiscally advantageous rather than what is morally upright. And I think we really started to decline in a major way there. You have the sexual revolution that comes along, free love, that kind of stuff, and you have later the age of information, where now you have the millennial generation called the generation of nostalgia, where we remember a day and age before the iPhone and are now waking up to the fact that like big tech companies really just use this as an experiment for so long to see what the effect of this would be. And information becomes readily available, pornography becomes readily available, and instead of having men who are willing to work hard and do the hard things, we've become this society of weak and flabby masturbatory men who can't lead anything. During the world wars, you had men step out of leading the church to go fight the war, and you'd have these women step in, and you'd start to see the feminization of the church, where they'd bring flowers in, and it became less masculine worship, and become a much more feminine thing. And the older guys weren't going to fight their daughters on that because they just wanted to be able to see their grandkids while their sons were away at the war. And so church became this kind of weak thing where you have a bunch of guys like you and I who grew up Christian adjacent, who are just like, man, this is really not like, I don't really honestly want anything to do with this. This has nothing to offer me. This isn't going to teach me anything about being a man. It's not going to teach me anything about being like who I'm supposed to be. There's no sense of mission. It's just like, hey, you come here, you pay your guild dues every week, and if you need counseling, then great. And it's just like, hey, love everybody and sing some kumbaya songs, and like nobody, like no men are going to get on board with that. At least not any strong ones. So you have this degradation of the American psyche, and which when the internet first became a thing, thanks Al Gore, then which is a joke, obviously. The
Series of tubes.
uh, you have the age of information taking off, and information just becomes readily available to everybody, and everybody's kind of going anywhere they can to find some place of significance. And you'd have our parents would tell us, "Hey, don't believe anything you find on the internet," which is ironic because now they believe everything that they see on the internet. My mother-in-law sent me this AI generated video of John MacArthur preaching this message that she's like, "Oh, this is such a great message," and I'm like, "He would never say that. That's not John MacArthur, but it looks exactly like him." And he's going through. I mean, it's just very well done, but it's AI, and that's a scary thing because now you can pirate the authority of
Hmm.
these guys in the religious institutions who are now waking up. And it ultimately leads to the pendulum shifting in the opposite direction, where men are starting to wake up and realize like that this cannot be it. There's got to be something more to this life other than just sort of like going home and having this fake conquest where I can just go hide in the closet, masturbate at 2 a.m. to some like cheap pornography, and there has to be something more to life than this. But all of this stuff was, I think, insidious and purposeful in its inception. The Smith-Mundt Act really made it significantly more possible. You have this hypersexualization of women in a way that is really honestly degrading to the woman, but it's all done in the name of empowering women and like, hey, your body, your choice, all this kind of stuff, which we could get into if you wanted to as well. But all this kind of stuff that's like the empowerment of women and men waking up and realizing, like, man, like I don't want to, I want to have a family. I want to be able to have children. I want to create lasting legacy. And so all these guys are waking up and realizing you now have Gen Z who is shaping up to be the most religious generation in American history because they're recognizing, hey, if there really is a God, then there has to be, and he's the creator of the universe. It's not going to be some like we're not going to worship him by some guy coming in on a zip line and like asking for us to pay our guild dues. There's got to be something more to that. And so they want to have a family, but it's so hard to pull against because American society has begun to believe this lie that um, we can live our lives contrary to God's ordained order. And he ordained the order of men leading, women coming along to help meet. The women are the helpmate of men. In fact, women are the glory of men, it says, and Christ is the glory of man. And uh, so that's why I'm kind of like less popular as a pastor, is because I believe in traditional gender roles and people hate that. But people are waking up regardless and realizing something's wrong. And it started with our education system back in the 1920s, 19 through 1940s. And the education system really started to plant these people who are going to supplant our government, our family, and our religious institutions, especially the Christian church. And they've done a phenomenal job of it. So, like the history of it's not an accident either that in World War II, we started the Psy-War division under, I think, General McClure, who is considered the father of PSYOP. Right around that time, you started to see an increase in deviating from traditional family roles, where the man was the head of the house, and he was kind of like the wise sage of the home, and he kept things in order. Now you have this revisionist history of like, oh yeah, actually that was not the case. Men would come back from the war, they would drink. You have the silent generation. They'd get drunk all the time, beat their wives, beat their kids. There were certainly examples of that, but that was not the majority of men. So um, all of that stuff became insidious. You have Snowden, obviously, and who's starting to reveal and tipping the
What was the general? Sorry, I want to look him up. What was the general's
General
name?
McClure, I think was his name. He's if
McClure.
you search father of Psy-War or uh, United States military, father of Psy-War, both Special Forces, Civil Affairs, and PSYOP consider him their founder.
General
And
McClure. Sorry.
he, yeah, he really, he kind of like was the beginning of DoD PSYOP forces.
Robert A.
Um,
McClure,
yeah,
1897 and 57. Sorry.
Yeah. Great guy. Like he had great advances. I don't think it started off as an insidious thing, but by the time you get to really the end of Vietnam and Lyndon B. Johnson and his like effect on us getting into Vietnam, that was the last time we had a PSYOP campaign, and the PSYOP uh, arm of the military, actually CAG, um, the Delta guys, they started
Yeah.
their own PSYOP group like branch, and the CIA has their SSOs. So it's really become uh, sort of a joke to have like I'm Army PSYOP. They're like that doesn't really mean anything. You just basically litter the countryside with leaflets and to no effect. There hasn't been a legit PSYOP campaign in a long time. But the SSOs and those CAG guys, they're actually doing the hard work of like playing the long game. And that's where a lot of the professional side of PSYOP is actually happening. Um, but this congressional inquiry that resulted in like these three side projects for PSYOP to justify why they're around, in conjunction with the Smith-Mundt Act, started really leaning heavily into. There were a couple of internal memos that floated around the MESOC, I guess, is what it's called now, or at least it was when I got out of that. But the PSYOP command, a couple of internal memos talking about uh, what we do can affect American people. So it started sort of in they have a process when I got out. It's not called this anymore, but it used to be called SCAME, source content audience medium and effect. That's how you would measure. It's kind of a counter propaganda method. I think they call it like Marco now or something. I don't know what that acronym is, but the effect that you would look at in your messaging or when you're doing counter propaganda and analysis and stuff like that, we started to implement one of those effects and one of the audiences actually to be American troops, and that started with a recruiting effort. And so you saw this really awesome recruiting stuff coming out from PSYOP all of a sudden, and this great stuff. You can actually there's a great video called "Ghost in the Machine."
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Like everybody's like, "Oh man, I want to be a
It's a sick edit. I mean,
dude." It is, yeah. Ghost in the Machine. I think they did a second one. It
yeah.
wasn't quite as cool, but the that actually was kind of the result of this internal memo that floated around to like, hey, let's kind of see what our effect can be on Americans to pull them in. So that was made by PSYOP forces to target American citizens to bring them in under the name, like the guise of like, hey, we're just doing recruiting because there is a gross need. In fact, last year PSYOP got in trouble again because of their recruiting efforts. Um, but that was kind of setting the like testing the waters to see, hey, what can we do to try and impact American citizens. So and then you have these partnerships with like the DoD has like I can't remember what it's called, but they have a liaison office to influence like Hollywood and all these different movies and
I
stuff.
remember reading about that back when
That's it.
Transformers came out in like
Yeah, Transformers was one, like Iron
2007.
Man was one.
But and like the deal would be like, hey, we'll let you use all this military equipment, no cost. Just let us have a once over on the script.
Yeah.
So if you're Hollywood, I mean, it's not a bad deal. You're like, fuck,
No, I mean,
we get
like
to
it's
film
cool.
Abrams tanks and F-22s. Yeah, we just have to make sure that the good guy has the American flag. Like, yeah, all right.
good guy has the American flag, and you have like you watch Transformers, and you're like, dude, I want to be a PJ. Those guys are cool. They get to work with the Transformers.
They get yeah, it's just a complete. It's
They
like
don't tell you that the Transformers are actually just the transvestites. And
yeah, it's gonna say it's. I was gonna say though. I mean, if you fall for Transformers propaganda, you get to go work with the robot. I mean, like that's kind of on you.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
You maybe didn't have the mental fortitude to.
Right.
You were gonna get pulled into anything.
But that should like that historically would never measure up. Like you would never have the DoD overtly saying, and so they have like, hey, we want you to make these little edits here and there, and where once upon a time you had like a council of pastors who would say, hey, this is morally upright or not in all areas of American society. They actually would say like, like, hey, this is not conducive to American ideals because there's too much pornographic content. And what they called pornographic content in like movies that day and age was showing like a husband and wife sleeping in the same bed together,
Yeah,
uh, like in their full moo kind of thing. So
yeah,
we went from that to having whatever we have in today's day and age. So the DoD gets involved in Hollywood and all those kinds of things, and that's sort of also a product of the Patriot Act saying, hey, we can one watch American like surveil American citizens and now also propagandize um, Americans as well. And we start creeping into every area of life, testing innocently enough. Hey, like we're gonna have our propaganda division do recruiting from now on and see just kind of how that, or we're gonna test the waters with that because these guys really are the experts on like multimedia and all that kind of stuff. And to like the soft mind, that seems like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So if they're the experts, they know how to do the recruiting. But when you kind of look under that and you see some of the stuff that's going on in the War College and the Special Operations, I think, University down in MacDill, and they, it's all kind of this insidious thing where we're really just probing to see how well people respond to American propaganda, and they respond phenomenally well. And you know, you get into like all this Russian disinformation kind of stuff, and you track that down to actually be like American in origins. And we have the legal credibility. I don't think anything's ever going to really legitimately come of that because we have the legal authority to be able to do that right now. Not only the DoD, but it gets worse when you look into like Homeland Security and what they're allowed to do. And you had all these all this crazy stuff where they diverted like two-thirds of their counterinsurgency and counterterrorism assets to target like homeschool moms and like all these families that are just radical extremists that would reject the vaccines mandates and all that kind of stuff. Just like this crazy stuff and all the messaging that's coming out with the COVID stuff. That is all just this huge psyop push in order to try and get people to, and it worked really well. Um, you'd see these billboards. I don't know where you're at, but where we were at in New Orleans, we'd see these billboards of like, hey, there's $1 million lottery for people getting their COVID vaccine. That's just messaging for to try and get people to take something that has not been approved through proper channels and all this kind of stuff. So, but that's really pushed through well, not Homeland, yeah, partially, some of that was Homeland Security actually, and which is sort of jacked up because they would view those as anybody who wasn't getting the vaccine as a threat to American society, and then you have like the Department of Health and Human Services getting involved in their own targeting and messaging, where previously this would not have been allowed. So it's done a really great job. I am hoping that this HR 5704 or whatever will pass and they'll repeal specifically, like the specific verbiage is to prohibit domestic propagandization by the federal government. I hope that passes, but I think it's probably just a political stunt to get voted in again. But um, so it's been a huge thing. And it's been going on, I think, since the early 1800s, but it really kicked off with the Psy-War division. McClure, I think started innocently enough. And Vietnam under Lyndon, like with Lyndon B. Johnson, they really started making pushes to bring American citizens on board with the war, and so they were able to make some more advances there. Uh, and actually, I am of the opinion this is like we don't have time to go into that, I guess, but I'm of the opinion that they used um, some very healthy organizations, two in particular, in order to slant the American people's view of military personnel post World War II. There's a lot of, or not post World War II, post Vietnam, to get the American people to say, you had a lot of these veterans coming out and saying, hey, the way we were treated, that's never going to happen again on our watch. We're going to make sure that the people are supportive of the military. And so you'd have these veterans well-intentioned enough saying, trying to get the American population to support the military, and which worked phenomenally well. I'm very grateful for the work that they did, but it also softened one of the reasons that people were so not supportive of the war was because they recognized the propaganda that was being pushed and peddled on American people to support something that we never should have been involved in the first place. And in fact, the church was the one that tried to push against Lyndon B. Johnson. They told people all over the place, "Hey, don't vote for this guy. He's an evil man." And so, in order to silence the church, Lyndon B. Johnson offered nonprofit status to the churches who were already nonprofits just by nature of being a church. And that led to, in order to become a nonprofit as a church, as a 501(c)(3), you actually have to sign something saying we're not going to spend more than 10% of our resources speaking to political things. Um, and that's courtesy of Lyndon B. Johnson. So the church is then hindered, which is supposed to be the conscience of the state. You'd get these guys, and so he had to go through the veterans afterwards to say, "Hey, what happened to you was horrible, and it should never happen again." They did a phenomenal job of making sure that the American people supported American troops, which I'm all in favor for. But I think that actually started off uh, as a way of getting Americans to be softened to American psyop through the DoD. And it's a long timeline of events, but and I know I'm kind of sporadic and all over the place, but all these things tie together. Um, so yeah, mechanically, that's sort of how this has worked. They use the education system purposefully. That's why you see all this kind of like pride propaganda stuff being put into societies and or into the American population through the public school system and all these kind of mandates going through schools. And you have these people who innocently enough they go into a teaching capacity so that they can evangelize our kids, um, and radicalize them in a significant way. And it's a wonder that I think the statistic is 94% of children who grow up in the church but are in public schools end up apostatizing from the church in their first year outside of high school, so that they leave their families home and they're like, this is not for me. That actually, they probably actually apostatized like in high school, as they have these teachers who are committing 8 hours of their day to teach these kids how to think. The end result of an education is a worldview, and they've done a really great job of shaping a worldview to favor socialism and this LGBT alphabet, whatever, um, agenda and all this kind of stuff. And it's only because, actually, ironically, because of COVID, so many people are trying to go into homeschooling and like pulling out of the public school system where they're seeing the stuff that's being taught uh, uh, while their kids are sitting over on the computer in the corner and everybody's working from home. They start pulling them out and homeschooling their kids and looking for Christian education. It's only because that happened. And I think that we might see the pendulum swing in the opposite direction where people wake up to, hey, we're actually we are actually being experimented on through the targeting of Facebook and Instagram and social media and TikTok and all this kind of stuff, which is completely designed to create an echo chamber for you that's going to support and radicalize you in one of two ways. And the government, or the not even the government, the deep state, I think would is playing both sides of those coins. I'm of the unfavorable opinion that Q is actually also just the QAnon guys are also just a propaganda piece.
Hmm.
That's a psyop, but they have all the hallmarks of it.
Yeah, it's a pacification program.
Yeah, for sure. So um,
That was that was brilliant. You just ran like an hour. That was
yeah,
brilliant. As somebody that runs his mouth for a living, no, I tip my hat. You filled an hour, man. That's fantastic.
yeah. Sorry, the
No, 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 no. I mean, that is not a derogatory thing. That's fantastic. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people, hold their hand through it, which is fine, but that was fantastic.
there probably is a more coherent way of
No, fuck that. But that's the joy of the podcast. It doesn't have to be coherent. It doesn't have to be a laid out, that's if you want that, you go get an audiobook. The kind of beauty of this is it's any which way. I was
yeah.
gonna say for like a part two, I would love to talk about just if I were to pick apart anything, it would be so like the 4 to 9 month thing, like you just gotta outlast them, implying that the only way to do it is long term, and you wonder if that's what domestic is, where you don't have to worry about 9 months.
Oh, for sure.
You just go, hey, we'll just fucking do this. You can go 8 years if you want. You can go 20 years. You can go.
Yeah,
That's what I think. I think that would be a
yeah. That,
fascinating part two.
I could probably talk for an hour on that specifically as well. Uh, Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah,
I've been advocating like, hey man, we won wars back in the day because you deployed people until the war was done, and
yeah,
you come home when you win.
yeah,
And if we do that again, I'll be the first person to sign up for a five-year rotation because I don't want to go home anyway. My home life sucks,
yeah.
and so the and a handful of people really had pushed that, and some of the higher up folks had pushed longer tours for PSYOP forces. But yeah, that'll be a conversation for another day.
Yeah, dude, I'll text you. We'll set up another. I'd love to do a part two.
Yeah,
Um, if you want, send me any links you want me to put in the description, or if you don't
sure.
want, that's fine too. You can stay private. Some people don't want that. Um, but dude, I really appreciate it. That was a brilliant insight. That was a brilliant insight, and it ultimately I know it's brilliant because ultimately it's just made me feel uncomfortable. I'm like, it's which I suppose is if you're aware that it's going on, it should.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. The last thing I'd say on that is uh, the reason it should make so many people uncomfortable is because there's a very strong spiritual component to
A
this.
hundred. That is yes. Yeah.
There's this collective awakening, and I think the only way that ultimately this is overcome and people start pushing back on this is to realize men are going to have to start doing what they were created to do again. And in Genesis chapter 16, you see this story where Hagar, Abraham's man or his servant, is pregnant, and she is going to have this child. And I don't want to get into the details of this, but God names the child Ishmael, and he tells Hagar, "Hey, his name's going to be Ishmael." But Abraham ends. She goes back, and Abraham is actually the one to name him Ishmael, even though God told Hagar. He God changes Abram's name to Abraham. He says, "No longer will you be called Abram; you'll be called Abraham." So God changes Abraham's name, and then he tells Abraham later, "Hey, your wife's name will no longer be Sarai; it's going to be Sarah." So Abraham changes Sarai's name. The reason I say that is because men have the responsibility for identity in their home, and it is nobody else's job. God gives you as a man your identity, and your identity can only be found in Christ. It can't be found in your calling. It can't be found in your profession. Your identity comes only from Christ, and you need that fidelity. You need that fraternity, really, of the famous proverb, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Well, Peter actually tells men, he says, "Hey, live with your wife with understanding and with honor, as with the weaker vessel. You cannot sharpen iron on a weaker vessel. you need that helpmate in your wife, but she cannot be the one who sharpens you. You need the fraternity of other men who are following after God, who understand our responsibility is identity. And it's only going to be through men bestowing masculinity, bestowing identity upon future generation that you're going to have people wake up and realize like, hey, I know the truth well enough to recognize a lie. And all of this psyop, all of this stuff that's being peddled against Americans and it's being peddled against the family, that's being peddled against the church, I recognize that for what it is. But the only way that's going to happen is with a recognition of truth. And that's only going to happen by men bestowing the identity of, hey, you were created in the image of God to be in his image bearer and to represent him and represent him well. You were created to worship him, to know God and to make him known. And that is not something that you can do vicariously through your parents, through your pastor, through anybody else, but it's going to be done in fellowship with other men who are standing up and speaking against the truth. Um, I'll give a plug for faith in Jesus Christ and your own faith in Jesus Christ to anybody who would listen. It's the only way to stand against the insidiousness of the darkness of this world.
And that's kind of the silver lining I try to find in the last 50 years, 100 years is it's resulting in a new generation coming up who are like insanely conservative and Christian.
Yep,
And
yep,
kind of what we talked about earlier with tough love, if that's the outcome, then I would be grateful for what led us there.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but if
Yep.
that's what brings us there,
Tough love is a biblical love, man. Hebrews 12 tells us that God loves those, like he loves us. He loves those whom he chastens, and he chastens us because he loves us. And if he didn't discipline us, if there was no tough love, he wouldn't actually love us.
hey, you wouldn't care.
But the purpose of that is to yield the peaceable fruit of righteousness. Um,
So yeah, so when you have an uncomfortable talk with like a friend that's, drinking too much or doing stupid stuff, and you're like, I'm
right.
saying this because I love you and no one else is gonna say it, and you're free to hate me. But
Yep.
no, it's the same thing. You only do that when you love. Um, we'll wrap it up for right now, but dude, thank you so much for your time, and that was brilliant. I'd love to do a part two.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much.
All right, big dog. I'll send it to you when it's up, and thank you. Yeah, plug for Jesus
Anytime.
Christ, guys. Find God, let him into your heart. It's the only way.
It
Appreciate you,
is.
Kirby. Take care.